In line with the vision of Digital India, a roundtable conference was held recently in New Delhi to discuss and deliberate on the topic of broadband as a utility, organized by Cyber Media Insight.
Cyber Media and its brands, Voice and Data, DataQuest, PCQuest, have always played a very important role in terms of defining what sort of policy should be there for any kind of a new idea. So, we were the first people who talked about software exports in the 80s. We talked about bandwidth in the 90s. We talked about internet during that time and so on. And therefore we said that can we give it a structure? And what we did was that we said let's create this program, Cyber Media Insights, where we have closed door roundtables on issues which are of national importance.
The conference was attended by policymakers as well as top industry leaders. Few of the panelists spoke exclusively on the topic. We have with us Dr. Anand Agarwal, CEO of Sterlite Technologies, speaking to ET now. Dr. Agarwal, thank you so much for taking out the time.
Sure.
My first question to you really is that, data now is really pivotal to progress and also, of course, to citizens' right to access. Data is really the backbone. What is the role of infrastructure that you think, in given the fact that how intrinsic is data to our lives now?
It's data, you need to almost think of it as an essential service. So just like we have, for instance, electricity, we have gas, we have roadways, each of these services ride on an infrastructure. So if you see voice as a service, the infrastructure for that is spectrum. So for data as a service, which becomes a universal right for all the citizens, there needs to be a broadband denominated infrastructure for that.
And if one were to really look at in terms of best practices, what do you think are the best practices for a long-term broadband asset?
So globally, most of the governments are starting to realize that broadband needs to be seen as a utility. So a long-term practice, what most of the governments have started doing is planning for broadband much in the same way they plan for anything else. For instance, countries like Singapore have broadband infrastructure created by the government, and then it is leased out to anybody who wants to put services on it. So you have a planned infrastructure and you have the best quality of services to the consumers. And this model works best globally.
And if we were to talk about Sterlite Technologies, how prepared is Sterlite to build data networks?
We have clearly taken our focus that we are going to be designing, installing and managing data networks. All the infrastructure that needs to get created, this will be shared infrastructure, this will be infrastructure on which multiple services and multiple service providers would be riding. We have going to take a role which will design, install and manage these networks. We are pretty well prepared. We are doing several of such projects which are, so we are creating the basic data infrastructure for defense in Jammu and Kashmir. We are creating infrastructure, we are creating services for 3 of the smart cities in Jaipur and Gandhinagar as well as Ahmedabad.
And I know a large part of this segment of the business is private enterprise. Government has very limited role to really play. But any policy decisions that you think the government needs to look at to really accelerate the entire pace of broadband?
First and foremost, government needs to now decide that when they say broadband is a utility, there needs to be a broadband policy. There needs to be a broadband planning, infrastructure planning, much in the same way that the government has a power, rail or highway planning. In the annual budget, you have plans of outlays for highways, you have outlays for power, you have outlays for railways, you have outlays for roadways. But you have no outlays for broadband. And the opposite, you look at what can telecom sector earn from selling the spectrum.
Right.